We're covering the ethical principles set forth by the American Counseling Association in their 2014 Code of Ethics. Not only are these 6 foundational principles absolutely vital as you take your exams, they are also extraordinarily important as you go into the field of counseling. My name is Keegan. I recently graduated with a Master's of Counseling degree. This video is here to help you prepare for the NCE, the CPCE, or another counseling exam. My hope is that this video will help you prepare for these exams and learn more about the ethical principles set forth by the ACA. And considering how important these principles are in the field of counseling, having a really strong understanding of them is extremely important. The first principle is autonomy. The ACA says that autonomy is fostering the right to control the directions of one's life. Think of autonomy as a form of freedom. The client is in control of their life. They get to decide what they do and what they don't do. This principle is so important to keep in mind because although we will oftentimes have an idea or a feeling that we know what is best for the client to do, we don't get to choose what they do. That choice is up to them. If they want to use drugs or alcohol, they can. If they want to end therapy, they can. If they want to drain their bank account, they can. However, if they want to implement what is talked about in therapy, they can. If they want to seek out even more resources to help them, they can. If they want to read books that they think will be beneficial, they can. The thing is, they can do what they choose, no matter how much we think it will or won't help. That, in a sense, doesn't really matter because they can choose it either way. We can let them know if we have concerns or if we would make a recommendation that something would be helpful, but they don't have to take that information and use it if they don't want to. Not only is it important to realize that we can't control our clients and that they have the freedom and the autonomy to do as they wish, we also need to be aware that even if we chose and could direct them or could make these choices for them, it probably wouldn't be helpful. And I say that it probably wouldn't be helpful because they would probably feel like we're not understanding or listening to them, and we would probably feel like they are resisting us. Nonmaleficence is the second principle. The ACA says that nonmaleficence is avoiding actions that cause harm. With this principle, we need to be aware of what we are or aren't doing and how that can harm clients potentially. Not only would this include things that are maybe obvious, like demeaning a client or, being extremely rude or uncaring toward them, it can also include things that are maybe less obvious. For example, having an office that isn't wheelchair accessible can really be non-inclusive towards some clients and may make them feel as though they don't belong. Also, we could think about things such as using non-inclusive language and, for example, maybe asking a male client if he has a girlfriend. But if he's gay and we're asking if he has a girlfriend, we are really not being inclusive of the various relationships that can exist for our clients. And therefore, asking if he has a partner would be a much more inclusive way of going about this. So therefore, using that inclusive language would avoid potential harm to the client and to the therapeutic relationship. Think of nonmaleficence as anything that we say or do that could potentially cause harm to the client in one way or another. Principle 3 then is beneficence. In a sense, this is almost the opposite of nonmaleficence, and the ACA defines beneficence as working for the good of the individual and society by promoting mental health and well-being. With this principle, it might be helpful to think about what you can do to help the client and ways that you can improve their life potentially, all that would, of course, be ethical. This could include things such as being non-judgmental, using inclusive language, or just being willing to talk about topics that clients don't feel that they can talk about in their everyday life, or haven't got a chance or found someone that they feel safe talking about these things with. We could also think about beneficence as just sitting with a client who's in a tremendous amount of discomfort and being willing to just be in that space with them and help them figure out how to navigate their life while in that state of mind. Of course, there's an endless amount of ways that we could think about beneficence, but the root of it is just doing things that are helpful or good for the client. Fourth, the principle of justice is defined by the ACA as treating individuals equitably and fostering fairness and equality. Here, again, I think about inclusive language as a possible way that we could talk about justice. By using inclusive language, we are trying to meet as many people as possible with our words, and then once we have an idea and the client has told us more about their life and we have more of an understanding about them, we can then use more specific language that's more fitting for that client. For example, we could start by asking a client if they have a partner. If we find out that they have a girlfriend, then we could say, oh, what's your girlfriend's name? By starting out with that more inclusive language, we're allowing them to tell us the terms or the labels that they like to use, and then we can adjust our language to use those labels too. Another way that we could think about this possibly is with clients who maybe speak different languages or do not speak the language that we do. For example, if we have a deaf client or a client who does speak a language other than our own, by having an interpreter available to them, we're giving them the chance to succeed in therapy just as a client who speaks the same language as us does. So again, justice is about fairness and equality. Fidelity is the fifth principle. This is defined by the ACA as honoring commitments and keeping promises, including fulfilling one's responsibilities of trust and professional relationships. So with this principle, one of the things that I think about is confidentiality. One of the very first things that I talk about with my clients is confidentiality and what confidentiality looks like in our state. So what typically confidentiality would look like overall or in general, but then where there's also limits to confidentiality. Fidelity means that we stick to that. So when I talk about confidentiality, I'm sticking to that confidentiality for my clients. And if I were to break that, or if I were to go against what I told them confidentiality means in the therapeutic setting, that would mean that I would not be acting with fidelity. We can also just think about this broadly as applying to various ethical codes, that's a commitment that we have to our clients and to the profession, and that we need to act with fidelity by honoring these ethical codes. So I don't know about all of you, but fidelity is a word that I don't find that I hear very often. In fact, I would say that in the context of these ethical codes, that's really one of the only situations where I'd hear the word fidelity. It doesn't seem that it comes up all that often out of that context. So I find that when a word is unusual or just not used very often, it's helpful to have more familiar words that we can connect it to. And so with fidelity, a more familiar word probably to most people is faithfulness. And so when I think about fidelity, there's an aspect of faithfulness or an element of faithfulness to that. So we are being faithful to the ethical codes would be another way of saying this. When we honor the commitment that we have made with clients, we are allowing them to maintain faith in us, or we are being faithful to those commitments. Next, we have our last principle, but before we get there, I'd like to just quickly say if you're enjoying this video and you're finding it helpful, please give it a like and subscribe. Okay, so the last principle is veracity. And the ACA says that veracity is dealing truthfully with individuals with whom counselors come into professional contact. Similarly to fidelity, veracity is another word that I find that I don't hear all that often in my day-to-day life. So I don't know about you, but I'm guessing that's probably very similar. So when I think about veracity, there is a sense of truthfulness or an element of accuracy to this. And so an example of this would be the expectations that clients may have when they come into therapy. As we get a sense of what their expectations or their hopes are for therapy, we need to make sure that we are being truthful in those expectations. Because if they come in and say, oh, I'm hoping to come for 1 or 2 sessions and for my anxiety to be gone, we could of course just let that go and not say anything. However, the principle of veracity would tell us that we need to be dealing truthfully with clients. And I think pretty much no matter what the case is, 1 to 2 sessions for anxiety is probably not going to be enough for someone to really see a noticeable difference. And even if they could, we don't want their anxiety to be completely gone. Because some level of anxiety is going to be helpful for us in life, and so we don't want our anxiety level to be 0 all the time. We need some amount of anxiety to keep us going. So if I had a client come in and tell me that in 1 to 2 sessions they're hoping for their anxiety to be completely gone, I would want to then make sure that we're having that conversation about, 1, we don't want anxiety to be 0. We want some level of anxiety, and so I'd make sure that we talk about that and that they're understanding why I'm saying that. The second thing that I would then want to make sure that they know is that most likely 1 to 2 sessions is probably not enough for us to accomplish that. Of course, if I felt like we could do that in 1 to 2 sessions, then I would let them know that. However, no matter what the case is, I like to always make sure that my clients are aware that we can't guarantee that these things are going to happen. We can maybe make plans and we can have hopes, but that doesn't guarantee that something's going to happen. So no matter what it is, whether it's expectations that a client has, the goals that they're setting for therapy, I think it's important that we apply the principle of veracity or being truthful or having a sense of being more accurate, because this is going to be an important principle for us as we are practicing in the field of counseling. So whether it's their expectations or their goals for therapy, or no matter what it is, the principle of veracity is very important, because we need to make sure that we are being truthful with our clients. And even if it means that we have to have uncomfortable conversations, or if it means that we have to burst their bubble, unfortunately, we will sometimes have to give that bad news or say things that they don't want to hear. But if it's in line with the principle of veracity or being truthful, I think it's really important that we do it. That brings us to the end of the video. Hopefully you found all of this information really helpful as you prepare for your counseling exams. As I said at the beginning, the ethical principles are super important and something you are going to come into contact with in many classes, I'm sure, and on many exams. And so having a good understanding and a good idea of them and what they mean and what they look like can be really helpful for you. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a lot. Thanks so much for watching.